Hello, I'm Peter Machen. Welcome to my podcast. Roger Ballen is an American photographer who has lived and worked in South Africa for many years. Gabriella Blumberg is a South African filmmaker who works as a writer, director, and producer. I spoke to the two of them about Spirits and Spaces, a short film based on Roger's new book and exhibition of the same title. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And if you like this podcast, please share it with everyone you know. And don't forget to click on the like and subscribe buttons. Here's me and Roger and Gabby.
So obviously I know a lot about Roger's work, and I watched the film or the video, the film, several times and thought a lot about it. But I don't actually know much about how the collaboration happened or the extent that it is collaborative. So can you just tell me a little bit about how you met each other, how you came into each other's orbits, and also about the production, like basically, at what point did you meet, in the making of the film?
Sure. Roger, should I start off?
No, you start, Gabby. Go ahead.
I started working with Roger, helping him on a few years ago, helping him on a project. I was helping him actually convert some of his old archive videos a few years ago. And I spent quite a lot of time in Roger's space and in his studio. And I'd always been familiar with Roger's work. My work as a filmmaker generally, I don't always do such experimental work. I work as a director and a writer and a producer, but I've made some documentaries, some commercial projects for CakeNet. So really a wide range of features and shorts that I've either been involved from a writing, producing, or directing side in. But I've always really been drawn to experimental work, and I've always known about Roger's work. And I think spending time in his studio, I really got to understand a bit more about the process. And throughout the years, I've helped Roger on various projects. Often when when Roger, which I find really phenomenal, is he sees photographs not as the only way to explore a topic. What we've sometimes done is we've brought on board an animator who's brought the photos to life, and that's been used, say, for a social media campaign. So slowly throughout the years, we've been kind of working on more and more things together. And so when Roger decided he was going to publish Spirits and Spaces, and he thought, let's have a movie, a film that actually explores this world in more than just a photographic world, but actually, we can go even further. That's when that conversation started. So we had, it was a very collaborative process. Roger has these fantastic ideas and loves to sit in a room and chat. So we really spoke through all these different options of kind of storylines and how clear we want a story to be, or is it just this feeling? So we had a lot of these conversations, Roger and Marguerite, the creative director, and myself. And then I brought on board a storyboard artist to kind of start visualizing. And then I brought in the cinematographer, and we walked through the space we were going to film. And so even then we were still collaborating. And then even when we were on set, I know it was a phenomenal experience for our cinematographer, Gavin Pincus, because he would frame a shot and then Roger would come and look at the monitor and they would discuss the lighting and the setup. And obviously having, Roger's photographic eye, so there was always this collaborative process, but when we actually went into film, we did have quite a clear, storyboard that we had agreed upon. So we knew the structure, but we still allowed ourselves time to really play when we actually were on set.
Cool. Yeah, that's I've been wondering and just thinking about that, wondering about what it's like for Roger to in a way step back from work that is his but also isn't his, because there are a whole lot of other people involved. Roger, how was that process for you? Was it difficult at all?
No, look, I didn't think it was difficult because Gabby and I have worked on a number of projects together. So I think, and we spent a fair amount of time talking about the project. So it wasn't difficult. It wasn't like she walked into a space and started telling people what to do. So it took months actually to get this script right and plan the project. So it was very, you know, coordinated and mutual. And so we know each other, I think, quite a long time already. So there weren't any other issues. And I think we respect each other's opinions and territory, and we're flexible. So there were absolutely no issues involved.
Yeah. I think that a lot of people kind of see like a rawness to your work, although it's quite clearly planned. But I think a lot of people, people don't, necessarily look with a lot of, thought and contemplation. Um, but no, it seems to me that your work is always very carefully planned and very carefully considered. Even though it's taking place in that moment of the photograph. Um, do you, Roger, ever get like frustrated by people's perceptions of how your photography works?
No, I don't, because I after doing this for nearly 60 years, most of the things they find in the pictures actually are their own problems. Is they're
Yeah,
just
yeah,
reflecting their repressed, unresolved state of mind. So it's like a dog looking, if he smells food and is friendly towards you, the dog is interested in food, not you. So it's the same thing when people make these issues. Oh, it's dark. It's a little bit scary. Yeah, you're right. You have a problem. You have a problem. What do you do when you turn on the TV? What do you do when you go in the supermarket and see all the dead animals for food? You have a
yeah,
problem. You haven't somehow or another resolved your own issues related to uh, one state of mind to the other state of mind. So that's nothing to do with me.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I always think that every photograph is, on one hand, a self-portrait of the photographer on some level, but it's also always a, in the moment self-portrait of the viewer as they're looking at the work. Roger, do you think that clearly we ourselves, we operate subconsciously, nearly all the time. We are so rarely, properly conscious and fully conscious. We're biological animals. Um, do you think that if, as a society, we acknowledge our subconscious more and our inner demons and just the little things that make us run, do you think that would be healthier for
Yeah,
us?
well, I say that's the problem in the world, but and I realized that in the 1960s, I was very influenced by R.D. Laing's writings, and my first degree is actually in psychology, and he wrote a book called Divided Self. And so that is the problem in the world, has been, is the problem, will continue to be the problem, and there's no way out of this problem. So to resolve these issues, it takes a lot of knowledge, a lot of discipline, a lot of interest, and a lot of psychological liberation. And, we're three people sitting here that have a lot of education. Most of the world doesn't understand any of the concepts you're talking about. You might as well be talking about a man on the moon to most people. They don't know what the subconscious is. What are you talking about? And even if you do know something about it, it's a very mysterious element. And we don't do everything right and wrong also. It's not like we're perfect human beings, even if you do know all these things. So this is a very, very complex issue. But in the end, that is the problem in the world. It's about unresolved state of mind. And how that can be solved, don't begin to tell me. And don't ask me for any answers. There's no answers. There's no answers. The only answer I would say is, try to do your best and don't become over. Look at history as the fact. History is the way that history tells you everything about the species. So if you start to think that the species is going to change, prove biologically why it will.
Yeah.
It's
Um,
important to be realistic. There's no point sitting on a cloud and thinking it's sunny, and when you're in the middle of the cloud.
yeah, sure. I have two thoughts there. One is I also do know a lot of, extremely intelligent, well-educated people who also don't kind of get it, despite having yet a better platform from which to get it. Um, but then also just, my own, as a being in this entity, my own dark thoughts, I'm not at peace with them. I try not to, think of them as too dark, but, we all have these impulses that we just really not that keen on acknowledging, and possibly for good reason, but I'm not sure. Um, yeah. Roger, how do you feel about the fact that somebody can just ask, one of these many engines to make a kind of Roger Ballenesque image?
We tried this a few times with somebody who actually won a lot of awards in this AI photo business. He doesn't call his pictures photography. He calls it pronto images or something like this. But so he doesn't.
Promptography.
Yeah. So it's not. He doesn't say it's photography. So photography for this person is something working with a lens, with a camera back, and transferring light to a chip or a piece of film. So, we probably it's partly a definition of it's partly a definition, but in the end of the day, this AI has tremendous variability. I mean, the first exhibition we had in the Roger Ballen Center for Photography was this AI exhibition, and there were pictures in there which could have come out of traditional photography, and there's pictures in there that look like they come from a Hollywood movie. So it has tremendous capability of transforming things. Look, I don't. The same man tried to do something with me. Tried to take some of my images and transform them through AI, and the AI couldn't get it. There's just so many subtleties there and complexities and personality issues that when it tried to do it, it looked contrived, it looked staged, it didn't have a fluidity
Yeah,
to it.
yeah.
Whether that'll change with time, I don't know. And I think what we're looking at is, it's like in geology, we keep looking at new foundations, new levels. So in 10 years, reality is more that than it is now. So people then don't know the difference. That's what the reality is. And so I think that's what you're looking at, and people adjust to it like everything else. When I first got a cell phone, I couldn't figure out how it could ever work with something that didn't have the little tablets on the little keyboards on the phone. Now I don't even know about it. I
Yeah,
thought,
yeah,
no, I'll
yeah.
never be able to read a newspaper on the phone. Now I do this every day. So it's very difficult to know. And I don't know. I just consider myself, from my point of view, very lucky because I grew up in a non-internet age where there were no phones. When I went to university, they didn't even have calculators. So I have a different bearing on life, and I'm also in this generation, so I have an ability to balance one off against the next. And the next generation may say the same thing. So who knows what? That's what we live in. The whole planet might blow up tomorrow. Not even from a war. It could be a giant volcano that covers the earth with ash. We don't know.
I think, Peter, if I may jump in, what I found really interesting working in the same space as Roger for a few years and really just seeing how the foundation kind of works um, is that there's the Inside Out Foundation and Rogers Center, but as he mentioned, recently launching the Center for Photography and having the first exhibition that he mentioned was, I think it was called Psychopomp, and it was all about this discussion of AI, is that one really can kind of try box in a photographer as having a certain style. But what I do find really phenomenal about Roger, starting off from film to moving to digital, this is now Spirits and Spaces is his first book published in color, and then kind of as an aside, also allowing other artists in the Center for Photography to explore themes such as AI and how it's kind of raising these ethical questions. But what Roger's doing is actually like confronting these issues head on and moving with the times. And I just found that really interesting because I think a lot of photographers can get stuck in a certain way of working. And what I found really fantastic about Roger's work is that even though there's been work in different mediums, there's always still been this Ballenesque aesthetic. And even as you're saying here for this film, I directed it and Gavin shot it, but it's still such a close collaboration with Roger that it still has the Ballenesque aesthetic. So I think that's just quite an amazing trait.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I am impressed by the head-onness of exploring AI in the first exhibition at the Center for Photography. Um, yeah, because I am a digital child, but I also, I grew up climbing trees. I was born in the '70s, so I also, I had got my first computer in the 1980s, and I loved it. But I wasn't very aware of what we've lost. I love the internet; it's a dream come true, and it's also a nightmare. So it's complicated. But
I think that's what's special. Sorry, Peter, but I just may add one more thing. Is I think that's what's special about this film is that, there are these technologies available to us, but we still chose to shoot it and not make an AI film. So there's, I think, this wonderful relationship of knowing that these tools are out there and thinking how can it help, and sometimes it can help in, like, for example, when we were visualizing what the spirit should look like with the Hessian sack. I had this idea of this Hessian sack and maybe a mask, and I used AI to kind of draw up a mock-up to show Roger, so we could like visually be on the same page in pre-production. But then there was this collaboration and chatting to Marguerite and going and looking at all the different Hessian materials and choosing it and then building, what this spirit looks like. So I do think it's, you can't move away from, you have to use it as a tool and use it with human interaction. You can't disregard it completely.
Because there is a real world that does actually exist. Is in a way my response to that. But why I'm saying that is also because Roger, like I realized something just when looking at the pictures, and specifically because they color now, and that kind of shifted my own subconscious perceptions of them. And I realized that now when I'm looking at an image on my phone, which is where I nearly always look at images, I'm expecting a manipulation. I'm expecting a kind of Instagram slickness in nearly everything I see. And I realized very quickly looking at your images how flat our visual culture has become. And I'm talking about the actual depth of the photograph. So you kind of have a shallow depth in terms of taking the images. But the shadows are very much there. You can see the three-dimensionality of everything. You can sense the actual, physicality of the space. And that's not present with, nearly all of the images I look at. There's really kind of like a congealed flatness, almost like we're dealing with planes rather than dimensions. And the 3D world of yours is still very physically evident. And I think that's going to be hard for AI to get its, I'm sure it'll get there.
Look, there are lots and lots of subtleties to these pictures. Like I always say, the photograph's like a painting. A painting, say, takes 1,000 brushstrokes to make the painting. Well, it's the same in the photograph. Where you go left, I might go right. When I go right, you might go left. And so this is a whole history of building a building in a way. So it's not just meekly putting things together because they sort of seem like they should be there. There's a lot of subtleties there, and ultimately, you're trying to do one thing. You're trying to create an image that has substance to it, and AI doesn't understand the word psychological substance. It doesn't understand that word, and probably not in my life will. And so This is an intuitive and a conscious capability, and it's not one or the other. It's artistic and it's scientific, and to be able to get there, it's part of my personality. It's part of my personality. It's what separates me maybe from somebody else. And that's what a good artist does. Picasso's Picasso. That's what he does. Nobody can try that. You can try to make Picasso's, but it's still not Picasso. As much as you try, and maybe you'll make a flower that looks like his, but then the next painting won't look like his. And so it's much more complicated than it looks. And the problem with photography, it's the simplest art form, but the most difficult at the same time. Everybody walking around pushing these buttons, and anybody can do it. But that's what makes it difficult, because out of those millions and billions of Instagram pictures like that I've seen over the years, I can hardly remember one. It's like remembering a fly that went past my head last night. I can't remember the fly. I don't know what it even looks like. I forgot about it already. And that's what you're
Yeah.
looking at, unfortunately. And it's very interesting. I think the most interesting thing, then we go back to your first question about humanity. And we look at the Instagram and you can predict, I'm like 90% sure most of the time, what's going to get the most likes. It's clear. It's following this celebrity stuff, following things about fashion, following things about very extreme politics. So those are all the things that are really seem to be setting people off, and that's what this species is focused on. And to go back to your initial point about revelation of deeper consciousness, look at Instagram, and you won't have a lot of
I'm laughing, but inside I'm also crying.
yeah, that's what
Just
Nietzsche.
a,
That's what Nietzsche said. You remember Nietzsche's favorite quote: "When I laugh, I cry."
yeah. Because so I looked at, and I'm pretty, I may well be wrong, but broadly I'm right. Is I looked at what as far as I know, were the top, the biggest, the most viewed Instagram images or videos last year, and they were just hot people looking at the camera. Just people flirting with the camera, and that was it. And then, they go, 20 million views or whatever.
Yeah.
And I probably clicked on them.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. It is what it is. That's all you can say. That's part of a species. That's part of an evolutionary species uh, behavior trait. That's what we're looking at.
Roger, I just want to ask you, just because it's the obvious question to ask, and but again, I'd like to chat to you about it in more detail later. But can you tell me a little bit about your departure to, well, your journey to color, your shift to work towards working in color photography, which I know isn't instant.
Well, look, it happened very spontaneously when I had a book called Ballenesque published by Thames and Hudson in 2016. It was a retrospective book, and with each book, like that's why we did it with Gabby. I like to do a film, and so when I was friendly with some of the people at Leica Camera, and I said, "Well, I don't have a digital. I've been using film." And they said, "Here, take this. Take all the equipment. It's yours." So they gave me Leica gave me digital cameras, and I started making the video. And during the time I was making the video, I started just by chance taking color pictures because I could transform it to black and white. But when I saw the color pictures and made it into black and white, I said to Marguerite, my artistic director, "Oh, the color ones look better to me." So that was how it happened. And so this book is basically sort of a monochromatic color. It's not bright, bright colors. It's somewhere between color and black and white. And when I look at the colors, I understand the psychology of colors, but I think more appropriately when I look at the colors, I see them almost as black and white tonal relationships.
I can see why you say that. I mean, it's not exactly David LaChapelle,
Yeah, I'm
in
not
terms
David
of.
LaChapelle, definitely not. Then I give up. I'm not there.
If I may jump in, I think what was just really interesting when we actually were filming is because it wasn't we had our cinematographer and his lighting team kind of setting up then the color space was that going back to I spoke earlier about that collaboration with Roger is understanding we are filming like in color but trying to really match the grade and the look of the photographs and bringing those photographs to life in the film. And I think that was also so, speaking to Gavin afterwards was just so interesting for him is to have that such a close collaboration with Roger on set, discussing lighting and discussing framing and discussing, really getting that monochromatic color. It's a bit more difficult than just capturing something that's there in its vivid brightness.
Yeah, so I wanted to argue that is one of my questions that I got written down here is, so the film is in color, but barely, just. Um, and there's several frames, or scenes that are more, substantially more colorful than the rest. And as far as I can recall, it's the two dolls, the rag doll and the sex doll, are, quite explicitly in color. So my two questions are, every question is like 10 questions. But why did you decide to maintain, to keep it so dark, to keep it mostly perceptually black and white? And then also, what is the, not so much the meaning, but what is the significance of the images that are in color? The dolls, the female, I want to say female representation, but that just popped out now. But why did you choose to, make those images more colorful?
Sure, should I take that one?
No, yeah,
Um,
go ahead.
Okay. I think what was really just interesting about the process is that we chose props that were in Roger's book, and created each scene in the film is based on a chapter in the book. And so it's not an exact replication of a photograph, though some of them are quite similar, but there may actually be an additional prop in that room that is seen in a completely separate photo in the book. So it was almost like this spirit exploring each room is a chapter. So I think what we tried to do was get across the visual feeling of each of those chapters. So for example, the swinging rag doll is in the childhood room, which is, in Roger's chapter, did have a bit more of the brighter colors, had the clowns, and that's why we had that more colorful prop over there. And similar to libido, which is it's a quite kind of haptic and visceral, to also give that feeling. And it's interesting because a lot of the, just time wise, when you actually kind of timeline wise on the edit, the amount of time we spend in each room is quite a lot of time spent, for example, in the childhood room. But the libido room with the doll and the snake is actually very short, and it's actually just that one, kind of sequence. He opens the door, he sees this blow up doll. There's a live snake that flicks its tongue, and then the door closes and he goes into this next space. And I think because it was so short, we wanted that to be impactful, which is why there's that a bit more of that spark of color there, but actually not to kind of dwell in this libido section for too long, because sometimes I think also what's actually disturbing are those a quick flash of something. Did I see that quick slither of the snake's tongue? You don't have to be in a space for so long for it to have an impact on you. It's actually that timing.
Yeah. By that point, I think I was watching the film almost entirely with my stomach. Um, and that's something that I've been aware of every single time I've started watching it. Is like I start watching it with kind of my mind and my kind of mental construction of things, and very quickly it's a visceral experience, not a shareable one. I'm just kind of there.
I think that's also due to the sound design. We had a phenomenal sound designer, Richard Staub, and he really, really understands Roger's aesthetic, but also the psychological space that he works in, and how he uses, because he didn't do like a musical score. It was more layers of real sounds that build up to create this mood and this energy. So a lot of the sound is true to what you're seeing. You'll see a swing and you'll hear the eek of the swing, or you'll so a lot of it is this kind of diegetic sound that exists within the space. But then even in the kind of chaos room, which builds the whole soundscape in the film, it kind of starts off, slowly this spirit is walking through each room, isn't necessarily aware that the other spirits are moving around him, slowly becomes more aware that the spaces are alive. The spirits start following him. And as our main spirit kind of becomes aware of the room, the pacing of the edit and the pacing of the sound really amps up. And the way that he created that sound in the chaos room, again, it's not a musical score. It's actually these real sounds layered on top of one another that actually kind of exist in that space, but also in our subconscious, to give you that guttural, visceral feeling, and just suck you in. So I think it's really, he was just a phenomenal person to collaborate with, and It was also an amazing trust from Roger's side, because we have worked with Richard before on smaller little projects, and here I chatted to Roger about what we wanted for the film. I briefed Richard, but really I let him play. And then only when he sent it back did we give tweaks. But we really left a lot of it up to him, because we trusted that he, understood this world.
Oh, he did a great job. Really good job. I mean, that's the difference between photography, generally speaking, and filmmaking. Filmmaking is more of a teamwork, even though there's some people put more into it than others. But photography is a lonely wolf business generally.
Yeah. But I want to ask, is the spirit the artist on some level?
So I'll tell you our kind of thought process, and I think it's important to mention that for the general viewer who maybe doesn't know Roger, we were quite happy to leave it, vague, and let the audience really put in their own thoughts. But to let you in, I guess, on our concept and thought process was, when Roger showed me this book, and as you've been discussing, so much of what Roger's capturing is the subconscious. And I really love to think about it that he's actually showing us a little part in his subconscious. And it's almost that I was going in as like a documentary filmmaker and seeing how did Roger get there? And so we had this idea of this kind of unnamed masked spirit waking up in like a coffin-like space, and the first kind of space they're in is this childhood theme, and they walk through each space, and as they walk through each space, at first it's the audience that notices that the eyes of the drawings on the wall are moving, but the spirit itself doesn't notice. And then the audience notices that the shadow breaks away, and the audience notices that the spirits are following him out the door. But it's only kind of in the third or fourth space that the spirit actually starts to become aware. There's some real things moving there, real rats, there's a real snake, there's a real bird. So the spirit notices that, but only really, as it gets further on, does the spirit actually notice itself that it's being followed. And then it all devolves into chaos, which, as you know, is a common theme in Roger's work, is that at the end of the day, it's the only thing we can be certain of is chaos. It all devolves into this chaos. And at the end, when it is kind of revealed that the spirit is actually a part of Roger, our kind of thought was that actually the spirit is a part of Roger's subconscious that has woken up in this space in his brain, subconscious, somewhere deep down, is exploring this space, and now is stuck in this room. So if you actually look at that closing sequence, you might not notice it on the first watch, but on the second watch, you'll actually notice that there are molds of Roger's face and masks, silicon masks of Roger's face that are now stuck in these same rooms, in the childhood room, there's a mold of him on the bathtub. So now he's part of his subconscious is stuck there and can never leave. And I think it's true to Roger's work in general, is that once you've kind of explored the space, it's becomes part of you. And what I like to think about is that this book, Spirits and Spaces, is like a part of Roger's subconscious broke off, found a deeper part of the subconscious, got stuck there, and then with his camera he documented it and tried to put it in the book and show it to us. So that was kind of the overall concept that we were moving with.
I found that part quite powerful. I mean, I just want to quickly interject that I certainly experienced the film. My experience of the film was as a documentary, rather than a fictional narrative, or whatever. But the end, I presume. I mean, I don't know who wrote those words, but Roger voices them. And I literally about 10 years, maybe 15 years ago, I was at a New Year's Eve party, like by a river, and I was, everybody's like in the dance tents, and I was having a kind of spiritual moment, by the river, staring at the clouds. And I heard this voice, coming, from within me or from the sky or whatever is irrelevant. But it was like, you will never die. You will always be here. I very much got that sense just about being, stuck as a spirit in this moment of time, forever. So it was very resonant and kind of weird to just hear it, like so similarly expressed.
Yeah, it's this kind of this liminal space and this. I remember when we were just chatting to the storyboard artist, I described it as like this kind of psychological purgatory. Is that once a part of you has experienced something, it stays with you. And I think it's something that's true of just dream worlds in general. You know, when you wake up from a very vivid dream, you might not have actually been there physically, like you didn't get in your car and drive there, but your whole day can be affected by that because you experience that. You experience this dream, and you can see those visuals again and again, and you actually went on this emotional and visceral journey. And I think that's what we really wanted this film to be, was you kind of open this book and you jump inside and we actually get a glimpse into Roger's mind and all the different rooms that part of Roger's subconscious is stuck in and trapped in.
And of course, in a way, all art is also like those dreams or those nightmares. It stays with you. You see it. It never quite leaves. Maybe the million Instagram images kind of disappear, but like these things become a part of us, become a part of you. Um, Roger, like, what is it like? Because that decisive photographic moment that is written about in the catalog. Is such a thing in photography. So what is it like to see that moment extended in film and with movement and with, in time?
Well, look, I'm always happy if we can find other medias than photography to expand the aesthetic. So, you know, in the photographs themselves and in the film, we use drawing. So the drawing adds to the dimensionality and the substance of the message of the photograph and the film itself. So also there's you could say that the film is made up of installations, and you could say that the photographs have installations. So the film and the photographs are multidimensional art, even though they're transformed through a film camera and a normal camera, but they're multimedia. They are integrations of other medias. And so I think if you're able to do that and do it well, and they work in a harmonious, coherent way, then you create a higher level aesthetic, perhaps. But so this is what I've been trying to do, or this is a keynote of what my aesthetic has evolved into. It's an integration of installation, sculpture, drawing, transformed through photography. Now, if they're not transformed through photography, and you take a picture of these things, it looks like a documentary photograph, which is or a stage photograph, as they call it. But if you understand photography, then you have to make it feel like it's an authentic moment, and that's probably the most difficult thing in photography is to get that last part right. And this is the keynote to defining photography. It's about defining a moment that the viewer feels is not repeatable. You caught something that you could never catch again through the camera. It's always difficult to get that moment. In the film, you have it when the snake actually, we're talking about the snake, but that that scene really is exemplified when the snake's tongue goes out more than any other part of that whole scene. It's when that tongue goes out. That tells you something about the genuineness of the moment. There was no tongue going out, then that picture wouldn't be as that part of the movie wouldn't be as powerful.
No, it's just because we were speaking earlier about like animation and AI, and it was really interesting because actually our first concept we had quite a bit of animating Roger's drawings on the wall. And actually, as we moved along, it was really important, and this came from Roger and Marguerite's side, to actually have as many of the like effects as practical effects that happen in the room. So the doll swinging, we originally had this idea that the doll was going to like spin its head and follow Roger, and we actually thought we don't need to make this contrived. There are a few beautiful kind of subtle animation things with the one set of drawings moving along the wall, or when Roger reveals, when the spirit reveals, takes off the mask and it is Roger, the drawings on the walls kind of are subtly moving. But we actually took out a lot of the ideas that were going to be making props move through animation, because we wanted it to capture, as Roger's saying, that these genuine moments, the rat actually scuttling through the leaves, the birds with its wings, the snake, and then the in the childhood, that first scene when the eyes on the wall, there's like lights that shine through the eyes. We'd originally thought maybe we'll animate this like kind of laser beam light, and then we actually did it at the end with lights behind these little peepholes. And the same in the chaos room with the lights flashing. We had two different lights going off at different speeds and different color tones. So we actually really tried to keep even the technicalities practical and true to true to the room, even though you're making something that's, imaginary. We really try to actually just be in the moment in a technical way also.
Yeah. Because what I was going to say 2 minutes ago was something else that I just think about Instagram, but it's just, the perception is, it's a stream of things, but I often don't get the sense that the image I'm looking at is a moment, like with a lot of images. They just feel like an image. And maybe perhaps they don't feel like they even really ever did exist. Certainly the like intent is gone and there's a flatness, but it is, a lot of them don't feel like a moment in time because they don't actually feel like they're taken from life. And perhaps they're not. I want to ask you just like a really very pragmatic question now. What are you going to do with this film? Because it's, like even as a documentary, as an art film, it is, it doesn't have a genre. It's quite different to, most of the things out there. Are you going to send it to festivals? Is it going to accompany exhibitions of the book?
Look, I have a show here in Ghent in Belgium, so we'll be showing the film. And so when I give talks and have exhibitions, I'll be showing the film. And then we haven't put it on YouTube yet, so we hope to put it on YouTube soon and get some, um, promotion, try to promote it that way. Look, like the problem with everything these days, photography, film, everything. There's billions of these things done every year, every month, or whatever. So it's hard. You have to find ways of separating the work out and to get people aware of it. So there are different ways of doing this, and you hope somehow or another you hit a nerve, as they say, and it has a momentum of its own. So you have to try these different methods, whether it's social media, whether it's film, what are they called, film fairs or whatever they are,
Festivals?
or showing in an exhibition, or maybe a famous movie star loves it and puts it on their social media. So you just have to keep trying to get it out as best as you can, and sometimes it really takes off, and the best things sometimes sink, and sometimes it's an unpredictable situation. But our goal is to get it out there. That's as best as we can.
I think, Peter, from a kind of speaking with my producer's hat on, is originally when we made the film, we were quite sure that we were going to do a film festival run. When we actually kind of completed the film and also just looked at timing, I've done many film festival runs and been very lucky. A lot of them have been very successful and had films that have won awards and been, shown in different spaces in the world. But what we've actually decided with this film is, in terms of getting it to an audience and timing wise, is that we really love how the film and the book speak to one another. And because the book has just been released recently, we actually want the film to really accompany the book. And the disappointing thing often with the film festival run is the politics and the premiere status, and it will actually be a 2-year journey of film festivals around the world before it can actually get to an audience. And I think here, Roger is an artist that is so connected to his audience and has a following that really wants to engage in his work in all of its forms. So I think it's would do the book a disservice if it didn't have this accompanying film released with it straight away and the film was only released 2 years later, it wouldn't feel as relevant to the book because it is an extension of the book. So, you know, that's why we kind of watch the space. We have an exciting launch planned for the film, and then we hope that it can actually just exist on YouTube. And as Roger's saying, we've actually done a few short little cut downs from the film that can also exist in social media, so that people really can engage in the whole subject in multiple ways. And I think it's been a privilege for me as a filmmaker to see it as a film, but also to really understand how it works in this kind of bigger ecosystem of another way to explore this subconscious mind.
Yeah. Because I was very ready to convince you that you needed to send it to festivals, but your logic is like correct. It makes sense. Like, yeah. Can I ask you, you know, just talking about the snake, can I ask you about the presence of animals both in the film and in your work, Roger? And also just like how do animals connect or, you know, like our subconscious to our psychological interiors?
You know, look, I've been obsessed with animals, I guess, since I've been young. So, and as time has gone on, I've used more and more animals in the pictures rather than human beings in many ways. So, look, it's a very, very, very complex subject. You know, it deals with human relationships to animals, animal relationship to humans, where the animal behavior repeats itself in the human being, and maybe vice versa. It has to deal with primal evolution, neurological evolution. It has to do with ecological problems. It's a very, very complicated issue, and the animal ultimately is enigmatic to the human being. It's you don't know what the dog's thinking, you don't know what the fly's thinking. You can't get into its mind. You don't have its same sensory perception. But I think ultimately, if I had to make any statement, and you know, that's the first exhibition I had at my center, the Inside Out Center for the Arts, was called "End of the Game." Well, it really is the end of the game. You know, the relationship is exploitative, alienating. There's nothing productive about it. It's destructive. That's what you're looking at. One species on the planet is uh, upset the balance for a billion other species on the planet. So we're looking at a pretty sad situation. And I always tell people I don't have any answers. The only answer I could give to sort of a simplistic answer is you need to create more parks on the planet. That's about it.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
relationship of somebody sitting on Park Avenue's relationship to their cat or dog that ends up going to a psychologist 3 times a week is not about the relationship of humanity to the natural world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sure. I would again. I'd like to spend more time discussing that. But you know, we could go. Clearly, I can go on talking, you know, for ages about whatever, about anything. But I think that we should kind of draw this to a close now because you know, like I also I'd like people to watch this interview, and I also feel like I need to, you know, take viewers' times into, you know, consideration. Um, is there anything else? Well, actually, I just want to ask you: is there anything, Gabriella, that you would like to ask Roger that you haven't before?
That's let me think about. I'm very privileged that the relationship I have is that I can be very honest and ask Roger very direct questions when we're on set and brainstorming. So I haven't felt the need to hold back. Let me have a think about it. You can ask Roger a final question, and I'll think about.
Well,
I'll think about it.
I just thought like you know, I very seldom interview two people together, and I just thought it would be an
Mm.
interesting, you know, way to close it, especially two people who work together. But you know, if I put you on the spot and you know, and you don't have an answer, that's fine. But I also then nonetheless do want to ask Roger if he has a question for Gabby.
Well, you know, it's like somebody usually asking me what's my favorite photograph. You know, one question leads to the next, and which leads to the next, which leads to the next. So I think we've done very well in this interview, and we won't get to the last question. We just won't get there. I think that's the better way of putting it. We're not going to get to the last question. The last question, you're crossing the boundary from the verbal mind to the silent mind, and there's no more questions.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Roger and Gabby. To find out more about their work, go to talktopeter.com, where you'll also find more conversations with creative minds, as well as playlists, recommendations, and other useful resources. Have a wonderful day or night, wherever you are in the world, and thank you for listening.